Good morning, dear students. We will start today English Literature, Chapter 2, The Visit to the Mansion, page number 17. So, as you have seen this portion, they were talking on their dining table, and then once the Beth, sorry, Laurie wants to know about Beth and he asked, is the Beth the rosy one who sometimes goes out with a little basket? Right? So see what Joe replied. Yes, that's Beth. The pretty one is Meg and the curly haired one is Amy, I believe. Laurie paused. He then added shyly, I often hear you talking to each other sometimes when I see you all sitting around the table with your mother. It's like looking at a picture. Laurie poked the fire to hide the sudden trembling of his lips. So Beth then say, after Laurie asked her about Beth, Joe described about her family members, right? And then Laurie said that I see you all sitting around the table with your mother. It's like looking at a picture. Who said? Laurie. So, uh, while saying this, he poked the fire to hide the sudden trembling of his lips. Joe was touched. While he was unwell and lonely, she was happy at home with her mother and sisters. So Joe was touched, means feeling very unhappy, knowing that when she was enjoying with her family, Joe at that time, Joe felt very lonely, right? So for this, Joe was very touched. You could just come and visit us, she said gently. Mother would be glad to welcome you, and you will have jolly time with my sisters and me. Wouldn't your grandpa let you? So once Joe was touched, that's why she wants to invite Laurie to come to come to visit her family, and also she said that her mother would glad to welcome him, and he will means Laurie will uh, enjoy jolly time with her sister and with her. Wouldn't your grandpa, then she asked, wouldn't your grandpa let you to come there? I think he would if I asked. He's very kind, but he thinks I might disturb strangers, said Laurie. So Laurie replied, no, no, I think he would means his grandpa. He's talking about his grandpa. Laurie is talking about his grandpa that he would let him go, because he is very kind, and I think but I think means Laurie is telling this that he might disturb strangers as per his grandpa, said Laurie. We are not strangers. We are your neighbors and you won't disturb us. Who said? Joe said immediately. No, no, why you are thinking so? We are not strangers. We are just neighbors. So you won't disturb us. Then Joe and Laurie started talking about books. So, do you remember? They were sitting and they started their conversation regarding the books. So, again, they back to the topic. Joe was delighted to find that Laurie also loved books and had read more books than her. And then Joe then Joe found that Laurie already read all the books and he is very fond of reading books. So he felt, sorry, she felt very happy about Laurie, that he is also having same kind of interest. So now turn your page number 18. If you like them so much, come down to our library, Laurie offered. Grandpa isn't home, don't be afraid. So, as they were, means like, they both wants to read book, and Laurie knows that Joe also likes to read books. So he invited Joe to come, offered Joe to come to his library, and also said, Grandpa isn't home, don't be afraid. I am not afraid of anything, Joe replied, tossing her head. So Joe replied that I'm not afraid of anything. So Laurie laughed and led her through the rooms. He let her examine whatever struck her fancy. So examine means to check out, and struck her fancy means which attract you. Okay, so Laurie laughed once at her, and then he took Joe to his library room, to his rooms as well as the library room. He let her examine, and then he let her examine whatever struck her fancy. Let's see what are the things there which fantasizing Joe so much. At last, they reached the library where Joe clapped her hands and danced with delight. It was it was lined with books, and then there were pictures and statues, strange little tables and bronze pieces, and best of all, a great open fireplace with quaint titles all around it. So Joe was slowly examining the things, and it was very delight to see all those things there. First of all, there were so many books which he never have imagined, and then there were pictures and statues and what not was there which may fantasize anyone. So same thing happened with Joe also. So what richness, how means how delight to see all these things, right? Sighted Joe sinking into a chair. Sinking means just sitting into a chair and gazing around her. Gazing means seeing simply around the things which were there. Then Theodore Lawrence, you should be happiest boy in this world. Theodore, right? The exact pronunciation of this Theodore Lawrence. So this is the actual name of Laurie. You should be happiest boy in the world. Who said? Joe said. No one can live on books, said Laurie, shaking his head as he preached on a table. Just then a bell rang, and Joe stood up. Just now Joe was telling she was not afraid of anything. Once bell rang, she flew up, alarmed. It's your grandpa. What shall I do? Now see the situation. Just few minutes before, she was telling that I was not afraid of anything. Once she heard the ring of maybe the doorbell, she flew up, and now she is saying, "It's your grandpa. What shall I do?" Well, what if it is? Who said? Laurie. You said you are not afraid of anything. Remember? Said Laurie laughingly. So now Laurie is saying, you just now said you are not afraid of anything. what if it is? If it is grandpa, then why you are afraid now? Said laughingly. But it was only the doctor who had come to check on Laurie. So he said that don't worry, I know it is not grandpa, it is our doctor who had come to check me, right? Would you mind if I left you for a minute? Laurie asked. Joe shook her head and went off to look at a portrait of old Mr. Lawrence. Then Joe shook her head, okay, and then she went at a portrait of Mr. Lawrence. She was still standing before the portrait when the door opened again. Joe did not turn as she said, I won't be afraid of your grandpa. He looks strange, but he has kind eyes and I like him. So now Laurie was Joe was keep on staring at that that statue there. I mean that portrait, and then when the door opened, without seeing towards the door, she said, I won't be afraid of your grandpa. Now this time she is again repeating the same thing. He looks strange, strict, but he has kind eyes and I like him. Thank you, ma'am, said a gruff voice behind her. Gruff means a kind of, you can say, rough and low, mostly old man is having. And there, to Joe's great dismay, stood old Mr. Lawrence. Right? So, who was it? Whose voice was it? Of course, Laurie's grandpa. Mr. Lawrence is very amused and invites Joe to tea. There, as Joe and Laurie talk merrily, Mr. Lawrence replies how lonely Laurie had been and decide to send him to Mark's house occasionally. So here it was already done, but see what happened next. Mr. Lawrence amused and invited Joe to tea. Okay, there Joe and Laurie talk merrily, and there they also talk merrily. And Mr. Lawrence, means the grandpa, realized how lonely is his grandson. So he allowed Laurie and decided to send him to the Mart's house occasionally. Right? So this is it. Are you able to understand? So let me know in the comments, and I would like to tell you that suggest you that you should read this chapter once, twice, thrice, note down the new words, and we'll see soon. Have a nice day. Thank you.